keyboard to the boardroom. This is the Business of Esports podcast.
The fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation.
I, Prophet of Esports, joined today by my friend and co-host William Collis.
Yeah, we got the book of esports out. It's a big deal.
So everyone knows me as the Prophet and William as the Professor.
They may call me the Prophet, but in my life outside of the business of esports, I have worked on the investment side of the table for the better part of the last 2 decades. The single fastest growing area of gaming and esports is gambling. It's booming right now. You don't need to be a prophet like me to see that. However, as an investor, I've stayed away from gambling and betting companies because of the reputational risk and often shady nature of the companies involved. This was true until now. I've recently bought stock in a new public company called Esports Entertainment Group, or EEG, which is focused on esports and gambling. The big difference that changed my mind is that EEG is a public company, NASDAQ listed, and fully regulated, focused on esports betting. The regulatory and audit requirements of a public company are key in my mind to provide the needed transparency for players, bettors, and investors. I had an opportunity to host the CEO of EEG on this podcast a couple of months ago, and I was very impressed by his vision for the company. We've stayed in touch, and I'm delighted to announce that they've accepted to become a sponsor of the podcast. If you're a family office, institutional investor, or investor of any kind, really, Esports Entertainment Group, ticker symbol GAMBLE, GMBL, might be one of the best ways to get exposure to the esports betting space and gaming in general. Make sure to check them out at esportsentertainmentgroup.com. Having said that, I need to make sure to state that this is only my opinion. I'm not an investment advisor or selling stock in the company. Please make sure you do your own research and seek advice from a licensed professional if you're looking to invest in the field. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast. I'm Paul Doalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, William Collis. For those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for telling your friends about the podcast. Thank you for leaving those 5-star ratings and reviews. Thank you for buying William's book, The Book of Esports, which you can still get on Amazon. Probably still the best read in the entire esports universe.
Maybe in the universe.
Universe.
There's some pretty good books out there, but this might make the short list. So
I would agree. There's a Pulitzer on its way somewhere, right, William? I don't know. What is the award for nonfiction? I actually don't even know.
Adulation from people who read it. I don't know. It's nice when people like it and review it. So thanks, guys.
And thank you guys if you've bought Business of Esports merch. Thank you. It's awesome of you. We really appreciate it. We hope you enjoy it. If you haven't, you got to get your way to businessofelsports.shop and pick up at least a pair of socks. At least they're so much fun. They're awesome quality. I highly recommend it. Everyone who's bought one, I think, has been really happy with it.
I was just checking. I think I'm wearing them right now. They're amazing.
Are you really?
Yeah.
And guys, the best thing you can do if you do nothing else, just tell your friends about the podcast if you enjoy the kind of content we create. William, Happy New Year. It's our first podcast of the new year.
Oh my gosh. I didn't even realize that. I literally felt like this was like our third podcast this year. It's the first week of the new year. This is insane. Yeah.
Time is like flying. The days are all sort of melding in one into another.
I feel like it's like January 29th and it's like January 5th or whatever. I don't know. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
But new year, lots of fun stuff in store for the Business of Esports. So stay tuned.
Yep.
for all of the cool things that are going to come this way this year. But we start off the year here, William, with pretty big news. Like I feel like I thought this would be a slow, we would ease into it, a couple of fluffy stories.
Yeah, I thought we were preparing for like a gentle start to the year, like
Yeah.
because who has a big burst in January? But there was a lot this week. There's a lot to talk about. So,
In fact, so much so, I would say I'm almost going to call the theme of this episode like the big money episode. Like we're starting the year off with so much big dollars, so many big numbers. It's
Yeah.
sort of amazing. And we'll call that sort of the theme of this episode. And
Could be
better
the
way
theme
to
of
kick off.
2021. We'll see. But yeah, go for it. What was kick it off, Paul. Kick it off.
No better way to kick off than Roblox, right? Roblox, we talked about last year. We thought they were going to go public. They delayed their IPO. And now, a week into the new year here, and we see this huge announcement. This is on Business Wire. It's actually the official press release. Roblox raises $520 million, led by Altimeter Capital and Dragoneer Investment Group. So they announced today that they raised their $520 million in a Series H at a purchase price of $45 per share. If you do the math and all that sort of stuff, it values the company at $29.5 billion. Let's call it 30, right?
Yeah.
I don't know why they priced it so it's 29.5. 30 sounds so much better. But let's call it $30 billion valuation. I mean, how spot on were we? I kind of wish we could sort of, splice in the conversation we had on Roblox here, because not only did we say this would happen, right?
Yep,
that they would go do a private round. They've announced that they're going to do a direct listing, not an IPO. So this is essentially their IPO fundraise, right? That's how a direct listing works. You raise the money privately, and then you avoid sort of the raise you do that's part of the IPO, and therefore you avoid the roadshow, you avoid having to price shares and things like that. So this company has now been priced. It's effectively an IPO. It's not publicly traded yet. They're going to do a public listing, but this is the financing. And we called the valuation.
I know.
Right? I think we said based on Unity's valuation, I think we agreed it was probably going to be in this $30 billion ballpark.
Yeah.
And we were spot on here.
It's insane how closely we called it. I'm also surprised at this point they don't round it up. Like why
that's what I said.
Like I know it's just weird. Like you could call it a 30. It's 29.5. You can bounce that up. Like who thought that sounded better? Like
what's $500 million here at this point?
Well,
right?
I mean we're joking around, but yeah, this is humongous. It's humongous.
I love here particularly, William, the quote from the CEO of one of the funds that invested, because I think this is telling, and maybe you have some thoughts on this. It listen to the subtleties in the language here. He says, while once viewed as a gaming platform, Roblox has emerged as a definitive global community connecting millions of people through communication, entertainment, and commerce, said Brad Gerstner, CEO of Altimeter. If you didn't know better, what would he be describing?
A social network.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Yeah. You don't even have to wait. I was literally like listening to you and I'm like, this sounds like Facebook. Like this is, and most social networks go through that branding period where they get past their initial audience, right? Like think of Facebook. Facebook used to be just for college kids, right? Yeah. And I mean, literally it was supposed to be like, and again, this is common knowledge, but it was supposed to be like the Facebook that you got as a freshman to meet new people, right? Like that's why it's called Facebook. And now, it's, now, and I'm sure at the time they were describing themselves as a great platform for, college age students to discover each other and forge friendships. And it's the same thing here. They are talking about, like they would have said previously we're gaming, now we're something we've expanded, we're a social platform. And that's insane because this is, first of all, what I think we felt like Epic should have done. And this feels like messaging that should have come from Epic. This is how they should have been describing Fortnite. So it's surprising to see it from Roblox. It's refreshing because I'm glad somebody has this messaging. Somebody is looking at games as social networks and trying to turn a game into a social network, which is really the potential, right? And I'll say this lastly, like I've for a long time, ever since I wrote the Harvard Business School case, or co-wrote, I should say, on World of Warcraft, I felt games are social networks. I mean, and
Yep.
I'm not alone. Like, I mean, pretty much everybody who's thought about it realizes they're pretty much the same thing, right? But it's interesting to see this crossover into an investment thesis with this much money behind it. And I think given the success of this, it won't be long before we see other games and game companies realize their social networks too, right?
But do you think it's gone too far? Right? Like I've been so pro Roblox, right? Called the valuation, called this move, love the big number here,
Mhm,
right? It's
mhm.
all good for the industry. There's really no downside to any of this, right? In
Yep,
fact,
no.
$30 billion again, in kind of the context we're talking, in the context of a social network, is a pretty cheap social network, right? When you're talking about the Facebooks and the Twitter, like where you're talking valuations in the hundreds of billions,
Mhm, mhm.
this is a pretty cheap social network. And so
Super
um,
cheap. For the number of users I'm sure it has and the monetization per user, I bet it's a bargain basement steal, which is probably part of why they want to comp themselves against social networks.
yeah, but like there's a question of, does this go too far, right? Where the investor says, while once viewed as a gaming platform, as if like its gaming days are like ancient history.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like when
You
you
know?
log into Roblox, you're not playing a game right now. Like,
Yeah.
but no, but to be fair, like I think this is okay. Like I really think this is okay because like it's fair to say that there's social and commerce activity going on and that they're primary drivers. And I've always been kind of a believer that Roblox was not, and I don't disparage anything here, but like I think pound for pound, it's not the best game out there, right? I'm sure there are many young kids and fans that would dispute with me, but I think fundamentally the reason why it's been successful as a game is not that the underlying game or game mechanics itself were so incredible or so unique or the graphics were good. It was because it was a social and a commerce platform hooked into a game. And the game was fun to play because of the socialization features and the commerce hooks.
So you don't
And
think that language goes too far?
I don't think it does in this case. No, no. Like I'll put it this way: like if Fortnite were describing itself that way without some major changes, I'd say I appreciate the aspiration, but that's reaching, right?
Yep.
But this really does have other hooks in it. It really does, right? So I mean, it's definitely like definitely, a vanguard language, right? Like it's somebody trying to change perception of the business. But as long as the strategy meets the attempt to change perception, I think it's good for them.
Well, let me push this one step further, because the article ends with, typical of a press release about Roblox, about Altimeter Capital, right? There's always like the about sections for the companies mentioned in the press release, right?
Everyone
And
loves
the
the
about Roblox, let me just read the first sentence.
okay.
Again, it's like there's a question mark here. Is this have we gone too far? Right? And the sentence here is, Roblox's mission is to build a human co-experience platform that enables shared experiences among billions of users. So no gaming in that sentence,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
experience twice, human once, shared once, billions once, like
It's a lot of good words, like yeah, it's a lot of good words. No, I mean, look, I mean, clear, clearly, it will remain to be seen whether or not they're messaging this way to get a great valuation, or if they're messaging this way because they generally believe the platform can grow into that mission, right? Um, with Roblox,
it
I kind of,
feels like borderline disingenuous in the messaging.
yeah,
Like I said, I'm the biggest fan of Roblox. I
yeah,
love what they're doing. I think they've achieved and probably will achieve what Fortnite should have
yep.
in terms of growing outside of it being a game. It's just like when you don't even mention it at all.
Yeah,
is it,
like I would like somebody to say like most users download custom levels. Like
no, but it would be like reading a Tesla press release and the word car is not used,
I
or
get that.
automobile.
It'd be like Tesla is well, I mean, but don't they read that way anyway? Don't they start with Tesla as the future of human transportation or something? I mean, I don't know,
I don't
but
know. I don't know.
I actually really don't know. But I mean, yeah, I agree. But like, I mean, at the end of the day, like, I'd rather like, first of all, I think it's great for gaming and esports because, and I know sometimes we get a little bit of criticized for doing gaming news on esports, but the reality is this is so core to what's happening in interactive entertainment. Like, we can't not discuss this, right? So that's the first piece. Then the second piece is like, okay, so, I get that, like, I get that this might be a reach, and I think probably internally they're going to say it's a reach today. But I appreciate the fact that the market is recognizing that games can be more than games, right? That games can be a bridge into something, and that fundamentally what games are about, like interactive worlds, can be a lot more than just Half-Life and Street Fighter, right?
Yep.
And I think whether or not they execute this change so fully as to earn that mission, I think it's going to make it easier for the next business to message. I think we're going to see more businesses messaging this. And I think as a result, we'll see the games medium mature into more of its full potential.
I agree, William. Two more thoughts here before we move on here.
Cool.
I've often said the day we have, 3 dedicated partners at Sequoia investing in games, that's when we've made it as an industry. I just want to point out here, Altimeter Capital and Dragoneer, these are not like Mickey Mouse funds, right? Like Altimeter Capital manages like $15 billion or something like that. Dragoneer is like a $12 billion fund. Like, we're talking major institutional capital, right? Investing hundreds of million, like even for a $12 billion fund, writing a $200 or $300 million check is not insignificant, right? This is not like play money that they're just throwing around. Like, this is a milestone. Like, I think that gets lost on people. But when you have Altimeter Capital, Dragoneer, this level of institutional investor, this size and scale of institutional investor kicking off 2021, like, talk about major advance from an industry perspective.
And then the other thing I'll point out is guys like those funds of those size, right? Like, this probably isn't going to be the only bet in the space they make, right? Like,
True.
Like the way their investment thesis operates, somebody in there has said gaming or maybe social co-experiences or whatever, I don't know, but like this space is something
we're not the business of esports anymore. We're the business of human co-experience platforms.
Okay? Human co-experiential competition. That's what we should call ourselves. Yeah. But probably like they have to have more than a conviction about that business. I think they have to have a conviction about the space. And that probably means more capital flows into the space. So again, it's really, this isn't like, because it's not a rinky-dink fund, and I'm not bashing smaller funds, right? But like they have more flexibility, they try things, they maybe go more. This is likely part of not just a company bet, but a sector bet, which means I think we can see more from big funds like this in gaming. What that more will be, I don't know. What other targets there are, we can speculate. But I would suspect that if you do an investment like this in Roblox, you're going to be making other investments in the space. So again, if you want to say 2021 is a big money theme, like, okay, this is like the water park has opened and the first people are getting up to go down the slide, but you don't open a water park and stop with one guest. There will be more people having fun in the sun,
I agree.
Wow, that was a weird metaphor,
completely.
but you know what I mean.
Let's here. I'm trying to find something we can disagree on. Can we? One last thing on Roblox here. $30 billion valuation, right?
Yeah.
If you looked at the S1, they have about, call it 30. I think let's say it's 31 million daily active users. Let's round down. Let's say it's 30 million, right? $30 billion valuation, 30 million daily active users.
I know the math you're doing there. Yeah.
Right. So we're talking about each daily active user being worth $1,000.
Yeah, that seems to be a tough pill to swallow. Right? Like I guarantee, I don't know anything about their underlying financial metrics. I don't think there's basically any platform in the world that monetizes at $1,000 a user, right? Like,
true.
Maybe timeshare rentals or something, but like, it's pretty, that I don't think that is their, average revenue per customer, right? So it's clearly pricing in a significant multiple.
They're betting on growth, right? That's
exactly.
I think what I get out of this. It's these investors are not stupid. They can do the math, right? These are probably some of the most sophisticated investors on the planet.
And the question is, how much growth though? Does this thing have to 10x or 100x, right? Like, are you willing to pay $10? Like, you're definitely willing to pay $10 a user, I feel like, right? The question is, where in the $10 to $100 range are you willing to pay for this thing?
Yeah.
And that,
So the question is, does it have to 10x or does it have to sort of 20 or 30x?
my gut is people like round numbers. I'm suspecting that this is sort of a business that's got to get up to, I mean, I hate to say it, but like a billion users, right? It probably has to 30x off of this.
Yeah,
To,
like call it $500 million to $1 billion
half
users,
a
right?
billion to $1 billion. So that probably is also, I mean, again, to make that really rough and tough, I'm doing super back of the envelope math here, but yeah, call it $500 million to $1 billion users. That's the definition of a social network. You don't get that big without being a social network. They're pretty much the only thing we have that's that big today. So that's probably also part of the positioning, is if you want to have a valuation this high, you have to have a credible path to reach it,
And I mean, we all know that once you have, even today, the kind of critical mass of users that they have, there are ways to monetize this that they just aren't exploring right now. Like, this is more than just selling skins or mini games or whatever else, the ways Roblox is monetizing today. I foresee a definite expansion and a concerted effort to get more dollars out of every user.
Completely.
And so it'll be interesting to see how they solve that problem. It'll be interesting to see how they grow. But I love everything about this story. I love the big numbers. I love the investors involved. I just think like the parallel with Epic for me is just so stark. I really think Roblox is doing a much better job.
I completely agree.
Let's move on to another big number story here, William. This one,
I love big
numbers. A little bit different sort of look and feel to this story. This one's from Yahoo Sports. The headline is Star Citizen is the $339 million game that still doesn't have a release date. The article talks about how it's been 10 years in development. Head developer Chris Roberts announced it in 2010 with a Kickstarter campaign. Tens of thousands of people have backed the project in those days. Now, I don't even know how many they're up to. I'm not sure if the article says it, but there's a lot of backers at this point. People have been buying like ships and things, assuming the game is coming out at some point. But they've raised a total of $339 million on nothing, on vapor, essentially. And it continues to be delayed. In the context of Cyberpunk, right? Are we worried that Star Citizen here continues a somewhat unfortunate trend and maybe blows up in a lot of people's faces?
Well, let me answer this gently. First of all, I hope that is not the case, right? Because I would very much like this game to be everything it's promised. And so do a lot of people I know. Like a lot of people I know have been wanting this game for close to 10 years, right?
Yep.
Really feel that the genre needs this sort of definitive, expansive take. There's plenty of games in the space genre that do one element pretty well, like a ship sim or an exploration sim or a mining sim, right? But like nothing that's captured the full, I call it like the Firefly fantasy. You guys remember the TV show Firefly, right? Like,
yep.
So I definitely buy that there's a real market need, and I hope it's successful. At the same time, like, let's be really realistic here, because unless I'm wrong, you can play Star Citizen, right? Like there are open betas. I've watched my friends play it. Like I've watched them.
Yeah, but I don't think there's much there.
Exactly.
You know what's sad, William? Side note here, and maybe you have the same experience. I'm pretty sure I bought a ship like 5 years ago or 6 years ago. And I just don't remember now.
Yeah.
Like I forgot about it.
No, I think that's kind of true. I remember when it was coming out, I was like, I should probably back that. But it's been so long. I'm like, I don't even know if I have the email I backed it.
Exactly. Like I don't know if I have a login.
It's like
I forget what the game's even about.
It's the Bitcoin of the future. Going to be like, where was that Imperium class ship? Like, but no, like it's weird, right? It's weird because like 339 million would be like, okay, so that would
that's almost 30. That's almost 30. That's more than $30 million a year of money they've burned.
It
over
would
the last
also
10 years.
put it, for example, among the most expensive movies, right, of all time, right? I think that's like a
Yeah.
large budget for like I think we're talking like Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings territory here, right? Like,
Yep.
and the problem is, and I think if Cyberpunk's taught us one thing, it's expectations, right? The risk with this type of approach is this much time, this much money, people think it's gonna like just it doesn't matter how talented the developers are. I think people's expectations like leave reality behind. And the also thing is, as I sort of said, like partly these long development cycles just don't work because the world changes. Like PC gaming had different high-end specs 10 years ago. There were
Yep.
different major platforms, right? Like there've been huge advances in codecs and open source libraries and all sorts like it's like like there's a lot of development in gaming that basically you miss because the mark for your development and your budget and what you can incorporate starts when you develop the game. So really the impression I have when games go beyond the 3-year mark, I always like to kind of in my head imagine that the game had to reset a little bit, that
Yep.
they can keep some of the systems and the structure, but fundamentally like the foundation gets so old on the house, you probably need to go pour a new foundation, right? And yeah, I think the only difference between these guys and Cyberpunk is I think these guys might recognize the risks around launching and recognize that taking a long time, delays. But at this point, 330 million, like people are going to be so disappointed unless it's so incredible. And based on what I've seen from the demo, I would thought parts look pretty awesome. Like I loved that you walked from a space station into your ship, took off and flew across the galaxy. Like that was pretty seamless and pretty interesting. At the same time, I don't know if I needed 10 years and 339 million to get there, like
There's another interesting discussion here, which is, in the tech startup world, equity crowdfunding for the longest time was not possible. It was essentially not legal, right?
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, investing in startups is risky, right? The chance that you lose your money is very high. And so governments regulated it because they didn't want, mom and pop retail investors to lose their money buying equity in some hot startup that they thought was going to be the next big thing and goes to zero, right?
Yeah.
Now it's sort of happening in a trickle kind of way. There's a few here and there that do equity crowdfunding and it works. It's not the biggest thing ever. How do you feel about this kind of crowdfunding for games, right? Is this a legitimate business model to raise money and to apply to the gaming world?
100, like 100% in principle, right? Like I think, and a great example of this
Really,
is
even given the risk, do you really feel
yeah,
like
because
that? Like if you're an accredited investor, it's one thing, right? You have more than $1 million in assets. You could afford to lose the $200 on a ship.
yeah,
But for like a family that might be struggling or an individual that might, like $200 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
If they don't fully understand the risks, right? That this game may never come out, this game may never live up to expectations. Isn't this the same as sort of a risky startup?
But then, I mean, yes, yeah, and I look again. I'm not making a legal comment here. I'm making sort of an intuitive comment, right? And the
Yep.
intuition I would have is here. Think about the opposite way. Like I'm a gamer. I know what I like to play, right? If I don't see games in market that meet what I want to play, why shouldn't I be able to help fund a game come into being that I might want to play? And I'll give you a good example. Like, look at I think some of the best games ever have been crowdfunded. I believe, unless I'm totally crazy, Hollow Knight was crowdfunded, right? Wasn't that a Kickstarter title?
I'm not sure. You might be
99%
right.
sure it was. Let me actually double check that while I'm talking because I don't want to say it and I'm wrong. But Hollow Knight crowdfunding, but I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. Yep.
I mean, the other issue with the crowdfunding is you have no recourse, right? If we find out, and I'm not suggesting this at all, like I'm sure, like I don't want anyone to misinterpret this. I'm giving a hypothetical situation, right? If we find out that they took the $339 million and they're buying Ferraris and mansions with them, right?
Yeah.
Like the problem is, having bought the $200 ship, I have no recourse really to go get my $200 back.
No, you don't.
I don't think. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think I have much of a path, right?
Well, the answer is, yeah. I mean, I think all of this stuff exists in a liminal world where the creatives can't abuse it, right? Like, fundamentally, when you make that that decision to commit, you're placing trust. You're saying you're actually going to develop the game that you say you're going to develop and get it to me in a reasonable. And that's why Kickstarter has like the risks disclosure about like, I have to know how to produce this and all of these things. And, but like, I think I would, I'll use an example of another place where I think it works really well, like Steam and early access titles. You could argue that that's essentially crowdfunding and crowdsourcing Q&A, essentially.
Yeah.
But
game testers.
Yeah, game testing, right? But like that feels like a really good thing for this industry to me. Like I'll give you a great example. I did Hades in Greenlight, and it was actually a better experience, I would argue, than having it at launch. Now, granted, that was a very well managed development cycle, because Supergiant Games, I think that's the guys who did it, are just incredible. But I actually liked that there was new content coming regularly. It felt like a game that I bought and then had the most incredible patch and update schedule behind it. Like it was like literally like a joy. It kept me interested in the game so much more, because whenever I would sort of peter out, as opposed to waiting 3 months for a patch, I'd wait like 2 weeks and there'd be something new and I'd be like, oh great, this is new, it's awesome. So I think it's good. And I think fundamentally, like, I like the fact that it connects the end. Like experiential products are tough to price in general. And I like the fact that there's some tie between the amount of development dollars you get and the traction you have in development, right? I think that's very positive that it unlocks, because it essentially lets developers say, I'm going to try a little bit. Do you guys like this? Okay, I'm going to do more. Do you still like it? And that's what Star Citizen's done. To its credit, it didn't raise all that money in one 3-hour Kickstarter. It's raised it over a long period of time, where it said to people, we're doing this. Are you comfortable? Do you like it? And people have said, yes, we love it. Give us more. So in that regard too, I think it's a little bit unfair to hold them, proxy for, taking advantage of the customers, because the customers have been giving the money all along. It wasn't just all these great promises. Like it's been 10 years worth of funding in this game. But yeah, I think I would not want to be in their position launching it, because I don't know how you manage the expectations coming out of it. They're so high,
I mean, there's also a great business lesson here around the psychology of sunk costs, right? Like, oh, I have $200 in there, and they come out with another ship. What's another $50, right? Maybe the game will finally come out. There's this psychology of, chasing, potentially bad investment with more good money.
I think that's definitely a place. If you've already committed $100, $500 to this title, to have quote unquote everything, and everything keeps changing, you're like, you're not gonna have it like, oh, I didn't wait to waste $500. I got to give another 50 to have it. So yeah, it's true. But again, I mean, I go back to, I hope it works, because honestly, if their vision, partly why they raise so much money is because their vision is a great one. Like I think we would all love this totally immersive, free roaming, freelancer style experience. The question is, like I said, can they deliver? And more to the point, even if they deliver, are people actually expecting reasonable things at this stage?
Do you remember there was a game? So Wing Commander is one of my favorite game series of all time.
I know.
Like my gamer tag is from Wing Commander. But there was a great game in that series called Wing Commander Privateer. I don't know if you remember it.
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
but you were kind of like that. Like you were you played this solo. Like you could be a mercenary, you could be a traitor. This was my hope for Star Citizen. But I come back to this one quote. I just want to wrap up on this, because when I read this quote in the article, I'm like, this captures my sentiment exactly. I bought a $200 ship back in 2015 when gaming was the center of my life, they said. Since then, I have graduated university, progressed significantly in my career, bought a nice house in an established neighborhood, and have had 3 more kids. Like, gaming is no longer the center of this guy's life, who's quoted in this article. But he spent $2,000 on this ship. Supposedly, there was a pack at one point, 100 ships for $27,000. Just FYI.
Steal, guys, steal.
So we'll see what happens with Star Citizen. Caught my attention because of the big number.
It's kind of the opposite story, which is, I think the big number around Roblox is universally good for us. Yeah. The big number around Star Citizen is a problem, because if it doesn't deliver, which which is a big concern I think we all have, what chilling effect will it have on crowdfunding and on this scale of development? And I think, unfortunately, just like we want game, like I fantasize about the game that's somebody's entire life work, that's in development for 10 years, that has this amount of fun. Because that's what we want as gamers. We want the best possible experience. So when these titles don't necessarily pan out or live up to expectations, again, I'm not saying that's happened here, but if it does, it's devastating because it makes the commercial publishers who look at those types of cycles that are required to, say, do a World of Warcraft 2 or something and say, not worth the risk, not worth the effort. Other people tried and look what happened to them, you know?
I have two more big number stories here.
Cool.
I just want to say two things before we jump into the last two big number stories here, William. Just a quick word for those of you who follow the podcast. You know, I am not the guy who takes big risks as an investor. I've looked at gambling and esports betting, and I think the sort of the area is littered with companies that are somewhat shady. One company, that's been true until now, but the one company that really made me think twice about the space, company called Esports Entertainment Group, EEG. They're focused on esports and betting. They're a public company. They're NASDAQ listed. They're fully regulated. This is a business that, we've had the CEO on the podcast. They've got an amazing strategy around building out esports and betting. And esports betting, frankly, is probably the fastest growing area of esports. And so if you're a family office, if you're an institutional investor, if you're looking to invest in the space at all, esports entertainment or esports betting, take a look at Esports Entertainment Group, ticker symbol GMBL, like gamble. It might be one of the best ways to get exposure to the space and gaming in general. Having said that, I just want to say this is just my opinion. I'm not an investment advisor. I'm not selling stock in the company. Make sure you do your own research. Seek advice from a licensed professional if you're looking to invest in the field. On that note, let's talk about another big number here, William. We've got two more big numbers that I want to touch on. Yeah. This one, we talked about Roblox. In that conversation, we mentioned arguably their big competitor. So they had big number news this week too. Epic Games, except very different. This is from PCMag.com. Yeah. Epic Games buys a shopping mall, which was the weirdest title to read. But the subheadline is Epic is paying $95 million for an old mall and expects to move into it as like its new headquarters by 2024. So they agreed to purchase the Cary Town Center Mall for $95 million. It's located, actually, it doesn't really matter what the address is. It opened in 1979. It's basically closed now. They were going to demolish it, but Epic swooped in and bought it. It's not really an esports story. It's a big number story here. And it's Epic Games, and anything Epic does gets news. I don't know, William. Like, they're in this fight with Apple that they're losing, right? Now they're spending almost $100 million on a shopping mall.
I think it's fine. I think it's fine. I mean, like, this is one where I'm going to strongly disagree with you. Like,
but why buy the real estate? What's the business rationale here? Like, you see a lot of companies actually try to get out of real estate, right? They lease space. They don't buy office like buildings anymore. Like, what's the move here?
Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not the most up to date on sort of West Coast stuff, but like, don't Facebook and Google own the underlying real estate for a lot of their major offices? I think
probably. I know Apple does actually, because they built their spaceship.
Yeah. And I think the argument behind that is if you are going to do a true marquee facility, right? Like, in other words, you're not just going to have desks and chairs, but you're going to do a real purpose-built mega headquarters that's going to be a reason talent comes to your business, like the Google cafeteria, right? Like, if you're going to do that sort of, then you're going to do so much investment in the underlying space anyway, that you might, like, it doesn't make sense to be a tenant, right? Like, at that point, it doesn't make sense to have the lease. Like, you're probably putting more money into the build out than you are into the land, right? That's, I think that's part of it. So what this suggests to me is they're not just taking on a big area, but they're really going to build something special that puts the Epic, like, that is equivalent to the Apple mothership or whatever it's called, right?
I don't think you can make a shopping mall as cool as the Apple mothership, right? So that's like somewhat questionable.
Also doesn't cost as much as the Apple mothership, right? Like, I would argue maybe these guys are being more prudent with their money and that they're going to be able to do some pretty cool stuff without,
But there's an implication here, right? When you buy that much space, the implication is it means you're going to hire a lot more people,
That's right.
So what is Epic? What do you think Epic sort of has brewing?
Well,
That was my sort of the question mark in my head.
maybe a phone, Paul. Yeah,
They
like,
would they would be
yeah.
smart to do that.
No, but
I will want some kind of check for that though.
yeah. Well, I suspect that the Epic, I suspect for all we criticize the Fortnite piece, the Epic Store has become a credible platform for, distributing games alongside Steam. Let's start there, right? Let's
Yep.
also start with, if you look at what propels Valve's business today, I don't think it's Half-Life sales. It's the Steam platform, right?
Yep.
So arguably, despite all the headwind around Fortnite, it's a real pity because I actually think the social network angle for Fortnite, as we discussed earlier, was like the bigger potential here. They've won a pretty important war, right? Or at least they're winning a particularly important war, which is the war for distribution of games, right? They're at least a credible player there.
Yep.
That might be a whole business they need to staff up and build around. And also, we don't know what they've announced and haven't announced, right? For all we know, they're on a Riot Games strategy and they have 10 amazing games in development and they don't care what happens to Fortnite because they have World of Fortnite coming, The last thing I'll say is these sorts of things, if I remember correctly from my time in corporate America, these sorts of real estate moves are extremely long range plan, right? Like you see even the time for this they announced is 2024, right?
Yep.
So like, this is something where they might not even have a need for it a year from now, 2 years from now. They might have sufficient office space to support a hiring plan. But what they're doing is making this really long range bet on the future of their platform and what they have. And when you consider the fact that they also have things like the Unreal Engine in here, I'm pretty okay. If you just deleted Fortnite, put it like, just pretend it's gone. But everything we talked about with Unity earlier in the year, right? And now apply that to Unreal and a massive games distribution platform called the Epic Store. I don't think you'd bat an eye at them buying a huge facility, given the potential of that market.
Agreed. Like, look, I'm not bashing the acquisition at all. I just think like they have so much more important things on their plate. Look, I don't think Tim Sweeney's spending night and day sort of buying shopping malls, right? But like
facility stuff is totally different. It's a totally separate group that runs it. And the other thing is like, maybe this is what you need. Like, look, let's put it this way. This is a headline that why isn't Fortnite back on the App Store? This is positive for Epic. It speaks to growth, planning. It's, as we called it, a big number story. Like, isn't this, a part of me almost thinks the opposite. Did they need to announce it this early? They're not opening it for 4 years, right? But is this a positive way to inject, optimism into the Epic brand at the start of the new year?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe it's purposeful. I have one love here and I have one sort of dislike, which is I don't think a mall's cool as a headquarters. Like, I just don't.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds cool that you bought a mall, but like malls don't have a lot of windows. Like, it's not the most, you know what I mean? Especially like an old mall from the 70s. Like, this is not.
What did you want them to buy, Paul? The Louvre? Like, I mean, it's like,
yes. I would have loved that, actually.
Epic Games buys Buckingham Palace.
I almost feel like they bought the mall just because of, it's like, what's the section of the map in Fortnite? There's like like something towers or something, right? Like where it's basically a mall complex. I feel like there's some like memeing going on at Epic to buy a mall.
What I was thinking is we saw the Cash App compound, right, for 100 Thieves.
Hold on, hold on. You're stealing my thunder here, which is the thing I hate here is, or the thing I love here is the price, right? Because when you put it in context, they got $95 million. They paid $95 million for an entire mall, right? When it was TSM, I think, who spent $50 million on their complex, and 100 Thieves spent 30 or 35 million or something, right?
Well, granted, I think that's their build out costs versus this is basically the initial acquisition cost of the land, right?
Okay, small, like relatively small detail there.
I agree with you. It seems if you believe you're in the market for that much space, it seems remarkably fiscally smart, right?
Right. When TSM can maybe at best, put 50 people in their headquarters for $50 million. This mall they could probably put 10,000 people.
I guarantee you they could host the next Fortnite World Championships in there. It's a mall. Like, so yeah, I mean, I think you can argue about the timing and why they announced it now and, if they really need it. But for all the challenges with Fortnite, a lot is going right at Epic. And if the price is right on real estate in your hometown and you do have a lot of success in your business, why not? Why not?
I agree. Let's move on. One last big number story here. And this is the biggest number of them all, actually. I saved the biggest for last, sort of. And this is from esportsobserver.com. The headline is EDG parent company SuperGen Group to build $1.5 billion international cultural and creative esports center in Shanghai. And the article talks about how the construction on the center is expected to be completed by 2023. The first phase will be $774 million. Total investment will be more than $1.5 billion. The total size will be 500,000 square meters and plans to host 300 esports international competitions each year with a capacity of 10,000 visitors daily. They also stated that it'll attract hundreds of esports companies and offer 2,000 esports related jobs. Part of the park's going to have an office building and an esports venue that will be able to host 6,000 people, a 5-star esports themed hotel, a breakdancing facility, an indoor skydiving venue, and many other amenities. So this is like esports mega complex in Shanghai. William, you love this idea or you hate it?
I mean, honestly, look, I mean, it's tough because I don't know if the scale of, I'm assuming the scale of the market in Asia can support this. But yeah, I mean, what's not to like? It's a massive purpose-built facility for esports. It shows that esports are becoming legitimate. And if I told you how much, if I asked you how much it costs to build, a football stadium, you wouldn't bat an eye at people spending billions of dollars to produce that, right? What's wrong with esports having the equivalent of football stadiums, particularly when this one appears to be quite multi-purpose, Now, I think there's a whole separate question of are we jumping the gun? Can the market support this scale of development? But that's where I might say Asia is very different. China is very different. If it can be supported anywhere, it's probably Shanghai or Beijing, right? It's somewhere like that. I don't know. And if nothing else, they're developing it in tranches. So do they have to build out the whole thing if it doesn't work? It looks like it's phased, which seems smart to me. But the more incredible thing is we got this far this quickly. We got from esports is in the Staples Center. I can't believe it, League of Legends. That's crazy. To $1.5 billion purposeful. And the fact that you see esports along words like intercultural and or cultural and creative, it speaks to how mainstream esports is becoming, but also how you can associate things with esports that are more aspirational than just being good at games,
Yeah, look, hard to not love, again, any big number story like this, right? There's no way you can knock billions of dollars coming into the industry. It's all good, right? It's good. That kind of rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Yeah.
So hard to knock that. The question is, when you dig deep, is this sustainable at this stage? And I think you brought that up, right? It's a question of timing. Is the timing here right? And, could they really host? And yes, the Asian market's different. There's way more population, way more density of population, right? Is 300 tournaments a year feasible? Just that number, right? You're talking about a tournament a day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And ideally it's an LCS finals every day to support that capacity.
Right.
But the other thing I'll point out in their favor though, is just to be blunt, it's not open tomorrow. It's open in 2023. Right.
True.
Esports is, again, I'm not saying that the growth is that astronomical, but think about where we were in 2018 and now where we are at the beginning of 2021 and how much the space has changed. Could not this look incredibly smart when the market has doubled again over the next 2 years? And, I look, there's a fundamental question here. Can Asian market sustain this, the local market, the demographic market around Shanghai. I don't know, but I appreciate the gusto and the investment, and I think it's going to make it easier for similar developments around the world to move forward. And I think that's only good for esports because, like I said, if you think about it, we have like a what is a big football stadium? Isn't it like $2 billion to build a football stadium or something crazy? Like,
Yeah, but you're talking about a stadium that will have like 100,000 people in it or 80,000 people in it,
the
right?
point
Like,
I'm going to make is there's a football stadium in every state, pretty much.
yeah, but
right?
there's no like complex like this, right? I can't go break dancing and stay at a hotel like
Yeah,
at
but
my
isn't
nearby
that better?
stadium.
It hedges this a little bit. It hedges, right? Like, I don't know.
It just part of it is also my experience in tech where real estate plays sort of failed. Now that's like you said, this has a lot of different components, and so if some don't work, it sort of doesn't matter because others could work, right? But like the idea of attracting hundreds of esports companies, like tech already tried that and it sort of didn't work. And I'm doubtful it will work here. I'm much more like bullish on the entertainment stuff. I'm much more bullish, frankly, on the hotel. Like I think that could have real legs. I'm not sure exactly where this is going to be situated, but to me, that's easier to keep filled and is a more unique value proposition. So like overall, I like it. 2023, I think, is aggressive timing. It's a lot of money you have to like pay back, right? Even at 300 tournaments a year, $1.5 billion, you need to be generating some pretty serious revenue.
Yeah. I mean, it's the law of large numbers problem, but like, I think this is a good one to end on because the answer is the jury is still out, right? Like, I don't know. This is a pretty massive capital expenditure. And I think I'm an optimist. I'd say this will work. I think you're a little bit more of a, why do you need to take the risk right now? Like, couldn't this have been proved out more, right? But I think the takeaway here as we as we start 2021 is, look, like, this is the first week. This is the first week.
Like over $500 million for Roblox.
Yeah.
Epic's throwing around 100 million. The SuperGen Group here is throwing around $1.5 billion.
Like, who sort of cares if this one particular massive capital expenditure works? The industry's hot.
Yeah.
Like, you can't look at it any other way and say, like, we're all of 5 days into 2021 and we have more capital announced for esports than I think we had in private investment altogether last year, right?
It's true.
Like, I mean, it's like, hello. So, I think sometimes there's sort of this myth of an esports bubble, right? And it's definitely true that I think some valuations might be a little out of whack, that in general, there's a lot of optimism in the market. But at the same time, you can't deny that every year we blow the prior year's benchmarks out of the water. And, you can't deny, too, that all of these numbers in the context of traditional sports don't look that crazy, right? So you tell me, but I'm personally looking forward to more big number stories in 2021.
I can't disagree with you there, William. And look, we may disagree on some of the finer points of some of these projects, right? But at the end of the day, like I said, my view also is just only a positive one, especially when I see big name investors like with the Roblox story, right? The $1.5 billion here is so interesting because of the sheer number, right? And it's hard. It's sort of hard to analyze because it's years in the future. The market there is somewhat more opaque than it is here, right? What's the average spend per esports fan over there versus here? How do you model that out? Like, how many years is this going to take to pay back?
I'm guessing.
Yeah,
I'm guessing, right? Like, the local government, the Chinese government is going to be involved to develop this, So there's a lot of unknowns we don't know. Yeah.
There's a lot of, like, I think if we had more of the data, there's sort of a deeper analysis you could do here and say, yes, this makes sense, over the next 5 or 10 years, which is probably I would say they're probably looking at a 10-year sort of time horizon here, not a 2-year time horizon. But what I love is that the indicator there, the signal there is just pure optimism, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same sort of indicator you get with the Roblox investment. It's like pure, unadulterated optimism around the space where they're predicting only growth, right? There's no holding back.
Yeah. So like I said, who cares if this one doesn't quite live up to it? The other one does. Like, you just don't have this many deals of this size announced in 5 days in a sector that's a bad bet. Like I just it's like look, I can read the tea leaves. You know, I might not like every flavor of tea in the brewery, but I can tell people are fans of tea. You know, like that's what I feel like here. So,
so this is a good way to start the year. I love the optimism, right? I think we picked these stories for good reason. That essentially wraps up this episode, William. I just want to remind our listeners for a few things. One, make sure tune in every Wednesday evening, guys, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. We do a live stream. We cover all the stuff that didn't make it into the podcast. We get to interact with you guys, answer your questions. You get to challenge us. It's a lot of fun. Highly recommend it. Go buy William's book, The Book of Esports. Make sure you guys go do that. And please, please leave a 5-star rating and review on the podcast. Tell your friends about it. We want 2021 to be a year of huge growth, and we can only do that with your help. And we really appreciate it. So on that note, William, thank you as always. Thank you to our listeners. And we will see you guys next week.